Hi, now that we've read in our data and cleaned it up, labeled everything, put value labels in, let's start looking at our data. So let's get this data opened up. Let's read in that data set. So again, I just changed my directory to that same directory I've been working in and just loaded up our data. You can see it's got those same 5 variables we were dealing with, only now we've got a descriptive label that we added to each one, and then each one has a value label to show us what a 1 means, what a 0 means, etc. One of the things I want to show you first is that so far I've just been showing you how you can type commands and look at the output, but when we actually start analyzing our data, we're going to want to save our output. And so one way we can do that is we can create a log file. So if we go up here to File and say Log Begin, let's give it a name. We'll call it My Data, since that's what our data set's called. And so now it's going to log everything we're doing and put it in this file called mydata.smcl. And when we get done with this one, I'll show you how you can look at that log file. Another thing I want to tell you about is that if you recall from some of the previous ones, if the output for any specific command goes beyond one page here, then we get that more here. So for instance, the first thing we do often is we say list, and that just basically gives us a nice listing of all of our individual data points. But we have 100 rows, so we get this more, and then we either need to click that or I need to hit the space bar to be able to go down. We can turn that off. So say set more off, and now that will be set off. So now if I type a list, it just immediately scrolls down, and then we can just scroll back up and take a look-see. So if you do things that have a lot of multi-page output, it sometimes is nice to turn that more option off. So again, the first nice step in looking at data is really just to look at the individual data points. And here we can confirm that our value labels are working, and the data looks like what we would expect it to look. We've got our 100 rows, we've got our columns. So that's really step one. Second step may be to use the describe command. So if I type describe, it gives you this nice little table. So it's in some ways it's kind of like what you see summarized over here in the properties box, but it's a little bit more explicit information. So it tells you what the name of the data set that you're working on is, how many observations, number of variables, lists all the variables, gives their name, gives the value label, gives the variable label. So it's just a really nice summary of what's in your data set. Again, I often use this when I'm working with a data set just to remind me what my variable names are and how to use them, but this is just a nice little thing to have. Another feature is called codebook, and if I type that, that takes multiple pages. Let's scroll up a little bit. It is what it says it is. It's a code book. So oftentimes when we have a final data set, we like to have a code book, a data dictionary, if you will, that lists all the variables and information about them, so that anybody who might be analyzing that data set or using it has a nice file that shows all the variables, describes them, gives some descriptive statistics on each one. So if you just quickly want to look and say, how many men and women do I have, and what's the mean of this variable, and do I have enough variability in this? The code book provides that. The ID doesn't really matter, but then we have our 4 variables that we care about. Sex, so it shows the variable name, it's a label, tells you what the range of it is, so it shows that this is just a 0-1 variable. If you have any missing, we have none. Gives you the frequency table, the numbers, shows you how they're coded, and gives you their value label. So a lot of really good information in a pretty small amount of space for each of the variables we have. Now notice that when I did that, it included the ID variable, and the ID variable doesn't really, none of the means really make any sense. It's a variable that is only has meaning in that it's a unique for each variable, each person, but as a variable it doesn't mean anything. We don't put it in our models very often. So we could do a code book and exclude that variable. And again, if you have a big data set, there's often a lot of variables in there that are used to construct other variables. They're variables like timestamps and all that stuff, and maybe we don't care to see any of that stuff. So you can just list the variables you want. So you could say codebook, sex, race, age, smoke, and then it will just do it for those 4 variables. So it drops the ID variable. And you can also use the hyphen shortcut. And this can be used in almost any command, and it's a great shortcut to know. So we can say codebook sex single hyphen smoke. What this single hyphen says is it's going to pick every variable that occurs by position between this variable and this variable. So if we look up here, these are always sorted by position. So it's going to pick every variable from this position to this position. And so we get the exact same thing we saw before. That's a great thing to do sometimes if you want to list a whole bunch of variables and you don't have to type them all out. You can use the hyphen. We also have a shortcut where, had I labeled all of these var1, var2, var3, var4, you can use the asterisk to say var asterisk, and it'll list all of those as well. Regardless of whether there's other variables embedded in there that you don't want, everything that starts with var will be listed, and that's another great shortcut to know. Okay, so we've listed our raw data, we've looked at our data set, we're comfortable with all the variables in our data set and how it's structured. Now let's start looking at some of the descriptives for our variables. Summarize is one of the most popular commands. It gives you a very concise table, and it's really just about mean, standard deviation, minimum, maximum. And so again, ID doesn't really matter. Maybe let's summarize sex to smoke. So again, do I have any missing data? Nope. I see the mean for every one of my variables. I see a standard deviation, and I immediately can see the minimum, maximum. This is a great tool. I use it all the time when I'm really just trying to make sure, yes, in fact, everybody is 14 years old. I didn't get any of the 15-year-olds in here. I didn't get any of the 16-year-olds. Yes, in fact, smoke, there's no out of range values. It's just 1 to 6. So it's a really nice, quick way to look at your data again and just make sure that there's no out of range values. If you have missing data, you understand how much missing data have and all that. So it's a quick and dirty command. So how we start looking at the descriptives, it really depends on whether we have a continuous variable, a continuously distributed variable, or a categorical variable. Summarize really works best in some ways for the continuous variables. So the only one we have, sex is binary, race is binary, and smoke is a 6-level variable. The only one that's continuous is age. And so the mean really does matter for this one, and the standard deviation is something that really matters. So summarize is really a good variable for that. So we can say summarize age, and then we can pick the detail option, and that just really fleshes out what's going on. So in addition to the mean and standard deviation and the number of observations, it really starts to tell us a little bit about the distribution of this variable, skew and kurtosis, and we can see based on the frequency table kind of how distributed this variable is. So if you like to look at it in tabular form, summarize with detail is a great way to look at your continuously distributed variables. Categorical variables, the best thing that I know to look at it is the tabulate. So tab sex, and it just gives us that quick and dirty little frequency table. Again, it uses the label. The tab uses our variable label. It uses our value labels to show you each one, and it does it as both the frequency, the n, as well as the percent. They're the same in ours because we have an n of 100. And it gives you the cumulative. So we can do that for each of our 3 categorical variables. And when we do the smoke, we start to see this one now starts having a little more information. We can really see that most of our 14-year-olds are never smokers, and very few of them end up being in the regular or established smoker category. Now, if you decide that you want to do them all at once, do all your categorical variables at once, you have to type tab 1 and then sex, race, and smoke. And then when you do that, it will give you each of those single level tabs: tabulation for sex, tabulation for race, and tabulation for smoke. If you just say tab, sex, race, now you're going to get cross tabs. We're going to deal with that down the road. But for right now, if we're just looking at descriptives, tab 1, and you can list all the categorical variables and get them all in one fell swoop. So that's just some of the quick and dirty ways that I like to look at my data before I really start doing anything. So we opened up the log. We said log using, and then it started a file. So let's close that now. So it's real easy to do. Just say log close. Now it closes that file, and it says that it's been logged right here. So now if you want, you can go over here and you can either use file open or file view or file log view. Any of those will work. We'll just use file open. And if we go over here and say, let's look at all my SMCL files, this is the one we called it. And then you can pull up and look at that log file. So now you have a good record of everything you did. Even though we are working interactively, it's still important to be able to save a record of everything you did so that you can replicate it and you can look at it later. So that's the log function. All right, next time we'll jump even further into looking at our data.